Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first of our series of Communities of Good Practice for grassroots officiating. For those that don't know me, my name is Mark Ritchie. I'm the Technical Officials Development Manager for England Athletics. But I'm ably assisted and supported tonight by two esteemed field colleagues of my officiating, and I'm sure they will have great pleasure in introducing themselves. Like I say, we are recording each of these sessions. There are four in total that are happening over the course of this month and into next. And these recordings will be uploaded to your home country's website, but also there'll be a circulation of the recording for everyone that's attended tonight and registered for each session as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my two esteemed field colleagues. I'm going to be a gentleman and say ladies first. Shona, would you like to introduce yourself and who you are and what you are?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name's Shona Malcolm. I'm a level 5, level 4 field official, and also an para ITO. I also have the pleasure of working for Scottish Athletics as a recruitment and development officer, and have been officiating for a few years, shall we say. Maybe not quite as many as Dean, but I think we're maybe even par there. But quite a few years. As I say, tonight, hopefully we'll be able to take you through this presentation, and don't be shy to ask any questions that you feel are relevant to this, and we'll do our very best to answer them. And I'll pass on to Dean.
What an introduction, Dean. Off you go.
How can I beat that? Hi, everybody. I'm Dean Williams. I'm also a level 4 field official with a lot of experience, shall we say. I'm also currently on the field peer group, UK field peer group. I'm a former European athletics ITO, and I'm also a level 3 javelin coach. So I can come at this from two angles as a coach and an experienced official. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So without further ado, hopefully this is the session you have registered for. If it's the wrong title, then I'll go away and have a word with myself. So tonight's topic is that I've been appointed to a long throws event. What is the long throws protocol? So that there's individuals from all levels on this call tonight, and it really is just to kind of cement what the process is for long throws, and whether that's you're new into fishing, whether you've done it a couple of years, or like myself, Sean and Dean, we've been in it for a lot longer than we care to say. So that this really is for everyone in terms of levels. And if we can help along the way, then that's all the better. Apologies. There we go. So what we will do is we will start the slide. It was working, folks. Sorry. There we go. Dean, are you able to resume the presentation, sir?
Yes. Okay. So obviously the agenda tonight is about key health and safety on all the long throws events. Vital as technical officials that we are aware of the health and safety of ourselves, the athletes, and other people that happen to be in the middle, maybe sometimes that shouldn't be in there. But other peoples and colleagues that we have to work with that you will find yourself in the middle with, such as starters, for example, and photographers. The throws protocol is vitally important to keep all of us safe. We'll find out what the individual steps are. And it's important to think that we get some continuity for the athlete's perspective and for our own perspective, that we know exactly what the steps are, that we can apply those no matter where we are, no matter what the level of competition, that we've got some consistency there. If officiating on shot putters is different, obviously shot is not classified as a long throw, but nevertheless it is a lethal implement coming through the air at speed, and sometimes you're in quite close proximity in shot events, particularly indoors, that really we need to consider officiating in shot put as so from the safety perspective of health and safety as well. And then finally, we look at some hints and tips for judging on the throwers events. And that's where people might be able to contribute from their own experiences, however limited that might be. We've all been officiating different lengths of time, but we've all got contributions that we can make, I'm sure. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. Okay, so the key health and safety guidance for the throwing events. And those of you that hopefully have done the health and safety course, you will find that this is regurgitating a lot of that and regurgitating a lot of the documentation that's already available on the England and home countries website and UK athletics websites for you to refer to. So first of all, then, in terms of the guidance, officials must always face the cage, runway, circle. Now that speaks for itself. We need to be watching where that implement's coming from. It's quite easy when there's a distraction. There might be a track event coming past, something else happening in the field, and it only takes a momentary distraction, and that's when things go wrong. So really, concentration and being able to face the cage where the athlete is throwing from, or the runway, or the circle, is really important. Also, sector judges must acknowledge the warning horn and wave. So we don't have to be doing this. We get a raise of the hand, something you can agree with your chief judge or the leader on the event, but so long as that response is clear, because that chief judge will not allow the athlete to throw until that has been received from each member of the team that's out in the field. And of course, on shot, we don't use a horn, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't come up with some system of acknowledging that the athlete is in the circle and all is ready for them to throw safely. So the event leader must not let the athlete enter the cage, runway or circle until all sector judges have acknowledged the warning horn or wave. Once that clearance has been given, the officials must not take their eyes off the implement until after it has landed and stopped. Bringing stories into it, and one particular difficulty is, and many of you may not get events where you're officiating at night, but if you're officiating in floodlights, whether it be an evening open meeting or a major championship that you get to, that really needs you to be ultra careful and not taking your eyes off the implement, because your sight lines can often be blurred. But no matter what the weather, no matter what's going on, you need to keep your eyes on that implement that's coming out towards you. If the implement's coming towards you, move away 90 degrees to the implement. Never turn your back on the cage, circle, runway at any time. And really, that's all it takes, is a momentary lapse in that concentration where you turn or you've been distracted, and that's when problems set in. Thank you, Mark. So what is the long throws protocol? Okay, so it's a series of steps all judges must follow on long throws events. And it is pretty much standardized. As I mentioned before, it's important that we've got consistency around the country, and also that the athletes, no matter where they go in the country to compete, they are familiar with the protocol as well. And that's why, as judges, we need to make sure that we are being consistent with the way we do things. It ensures all duties and processes are carried out the same way by all officials. To make sure all parties on long throws events and surrounding areas can operate safely. And we think about it, it's warm up as well. That's really important that this starts in the warm up, because in the competition, yes, we have to throw in competition order in warm up as per the rules. But by also carrying out the protocol in warm up, it means that the athletes get used to your way of working and they get used to that protocol, which we will go through in a minute. So if you reinforce that in the warm up, come the competition, the athletes are used to that and everything should go really smoothly. As officials, then we're not only here to enforce the rules, but look after and ensure the safety of all participants. So athletes, coaches, fellow officials, and as I said before, photographers can be a problem sometimes. We do have to keep an eye on them. Most of them are very good, and they acknowledge that they are experienced and will follow the protocol. They understand the protocol and will wave back. Some of them just might need a gentle reminder from time to time. Okay, thank you, Mark. So what are the individual steps within the long throw protocol for hammer and discus? So obviously, we've got a cage involved here. So the first thing we need to do is we call up the athletes. So as we've got here on the slide, Joe Bloggs, followed by Tim Smith. Before we move on to the next stage, another safety issue is who's actually got hold of an implement at this point. Really, you don't want all your athletes walking around with implements. So the person you've just called up, and potentially the next person that in the order maybe should have the implements ready to go, but nobody else should. So we then go to the front of the cage, and you as the leader with the horn, you've got the athlete standing next to you. You will face your colleagues out in the sector, blow the warning horn, signal, wave to all the judges in and around the throw sector. It's up to them then to make sure that they wave back to you. So you must make sure each sector judge waves and acknowledges that warning horn. Vitally important. So do not move on to the next step until acknowledgement has been received by all. And quite often you'll see event leaders pointing to individual members. Some might need a little bit of a prompt, but they know that you're looking at them and you're expecting a response from them. If a judge does not acknowledge the warning horn, blow the horn again. Or if you're out in the throw sector, politely remind your fellow official to acknowledge the warning horn. Once you've had that response from all of your colleagues out in the field, you can then lift the cone at the front of the cage. At this point, you then turn to the athlete. This sounds as though it's taking a long time, but it happens quite quickly, providing everybody knows what they should be doing. So you then indicate to the athlete that they can now enter the cage and proceed with their throw. One thing I do here, and I think a lot of people have started doing as well, is tell the athletes they can go into the circle, but it's going to take you time to get back around the outside and get to the circle. So I usually tell them that you wait for my signal to throw, because you might want a quick glance on your way back to make sure everything is still okay, nothing's changed, and then tell the athlete you're clear to throw. Any photographers around, we've mentioned before, around the throw sector, they also must acknowledge the warning horn too. I also mentioned a bit earlier, just be aware of what's going on around you, because you might have a cage throw and you might have a starting team starting 200 meters race from inside the infield. So it's always a good idea to, before the event starts, if you know that that's going to happen, to have a word with them to make sure that they are familiar with the protocol and they keep an eye on what you're doing as a leader as well. Thank you, Mark. Okay, we've got a video here if you want to play that for us, Mark. It's basically reinforcing what we've just mentioned.
Now, this was working earlier, says he hesitantly. Hopefully you can hear the sound, folks.
Okay, so Right, so we see here the athlete has accompanied the leader of the event. He's blown the horn. He's got acknowledgement, removed the cone, told the athletes they can go into the circle, and he's making his way back. And has indicated that to the athlete that she's clear to throw. Just an interesting point here, if you're in a championship and you've got clocks, if you blow the horn and then let the athlete into the circle, it's probably a bit unfair that the clock starts while you're still up at the front of the gate. So sometimes it's not a safety point, but it's linked in with this sequence that you agree that the clock will start once you get to your place. Whoever's operating the clock, you'll have an arrangement with them over that. Because it's not fair for the athlete to have that time used up and wasted. Okay, Mark, are we on the next number 7? Okay, then. So javelin, slightly different, but very similar. We're not using a cage. We're using a runway, obviously. So in this one, we again call the athletes up. But we then stand on the runway and then head to the center of the arc, blow the warning horn and signal wave to all the judges, again in and around the throw sector. So we're actually standing on the run up at this point, making sure they're not throwing. Incidentally, we mentioned doing this during the warm up. This needs to be explained. This sequence needs to be explained to the athletes so they know exactly. I'm sure some of you will have been in situations where you've had maybe a young athletes competition where you're stood on the run up. Nevertheless, the athlete decides to come running down and try to throw. So that's why it's important to explain to the athletes as well before actually the warm up starts. Make sure each sector judge waves acknowledges the warning horn again. Don't move on to the next step until that acknowledgement has been received. If a judge doesn't acknowledge the warning horn, blow the warning horn again. If you're out in the throw sector, politely remind them exactly the same procedures as for the cage throws. Lift the cone, indicate to the athlete they can proceed with their throw. And again, watching out for any photographers or anybody else that's out there, fellow official, track officials, and so on and so forth. Just one more thing with regards to safety, thinking about javelin in particular. If the athlete is taking a long run up, they're going to have to cross the track in some cases. So we need to just be aware where there's any track events going on, whether it's safe for the athlete to cross the track, and how we manage that. And another thing is stopping athletes in a general health and safety sense, stopping athletes walking around with implements and even trying to stab the grass and things next to them. Okay, it's not part of the protocol, but it's a very important safety point. Thank you, Mark.
So before we move on, I suppose, to the next section, there are a couple of questions, sir. So, or Shona, you can either you can jump in here. So the first question says, where does adjusting the cage for a right or left-hander fit in this sequence?
That will be done before the athlete is actually called up. Hopefully, you've got it written down and on your card. Certainly, the athlete's time will not start until the gates are adjusted and you have gone through the protocol. So really, the adjustment of the gates will start before the protocol kicks in.
And yeah, I think from my perspective, it's always handy to try and group athletes left and right-handed. Otherwise, you're going to have very, very sore arms and legs by the end of the competition. And
Yeah.
it's also good to help the flow of the competition. Shona, any thoughts on that before we carry on, or?
Yeah, just as I say, sorry, I was muted earlier, so I couldn't chat. Yeah, so just make sure that as you call the athlete up, that the officials move the gates before you call the athlete or if you have called them, keep them by your side until the gates are moved. Normally your person on flags would be moving it. If you don't have enough officials, it could be yourself, but just make sure the athlete's not sneaking in behind you if you're moving the gates. So you have to keep your eyes on everything all the time.
One other question before we proceed. Where would you position the photographers? Since you mentioned it, Dean, I feel that's only fair to pass that question to you.
Thank you very much. Well, have you ever tried to position a photographer? That can be quite a challenge, but basically you have to, they do try to get as close to the action as they can. A lot of them that are very professional. They know the situation, what is safe and what isn't. But you will try. Some of them will try and get in and get these really good action shots. And you've just got to raise your awareness. They should be out of the sector. You will get professional photographers with long lenses standing in the sector, but they are well in the distance behind any potential landing areas, and the judges out there need to keep an eye on that. But they need to be outside of the sector, preferably not close to the cage. And as long as you've done your bit and made them aware of what the throws protocol is that we're discussing this evening, and that they acknowledge you, that they also will have registered with the meeting manager and got hopefully a high vis photographer's vest in most cases. So it makes it easier to see them as well. And quite often you might get an athlete anyway that says, "I don't like them being there. Can you ask them to move, please?" So it's just liaising with the photographer, raising their awareness, and particularly in relation to these the protocol steps.
And one last question.
So I think the only thing I would say as well is, if you feel as the chief judge that someone is in an unsafe position, don't be shy to move them. You always speak up. So if you find someone if you feel something's unsafe, ask them to move. And if they say no, I'm fine, but you're still not comfortable, then you're quite within your rights as chief, or get the referee to then move them on. But as Dean says, most of the professional photographers have these long lenses and will be at a safe distance, especially if they're professional.
Yeah, I would echo that. They will try and get up sometimes close and personal to the cage netting. That seems to be the latest one. But as Shona said, we've all got to keep each other safe, and that is not safe if they've got their camera lens right up to the netting. And by all means, if you kind of don't feel comfortable enough after them saying no, I'm quite happy where I am, then get the field referee, or they will be able to kind of use their utmost diplomacy to tell the person they might wish to reconsider their position. One last question, Shona, and it's in relation to seated throws. The question is, for seated throws, which usually are all done at one time, do you use the horn before each of the throws?
Well, we were going to cover seated throws at the end of this, but we can put some of that in now, I suppose. No, the horn's not always used within seated throws, but sometimes it is. So for seated throws, you must do discus and club from the cage. These two are done from the cage. And the fact the horn is not used, but again, there is that acknowledgement must be given every time. We will cover the protocol for seated throws. It's not on, we don't think we have a slide on it later on, but I'll cover that when we get to the near the end of the presentation.
Right, we'll move on to shot put. Without further ado, Shona, over to your good self.
Okay, so is the shot put different, as we've said before? Then no, it's not any different, apart from the fact that we don't use the warning horn. But again, you should always be calling the athletes up. As we see here, Joe Bloggs followed by Tim Smith. And as Dean said earlier, there should only be those two athletes that have implements within their hands. So don't let anyone just take implements out of the trolley. Even if it's personal implements, they should still stay on the trolley or on the floor, depends if you don't have a trolley, until it's their turn to throw. Again, stand to the side of the circle. and signal to your judges. Again, you don't want to be standing in the circle because then you're taking more dirt and stuff in as well. So stand at the side of the circle with the athlete and just look at all your judges. You know, you can get a nod of the head or a wave of the hand, but make sure you're getting a signal back for them so that you know that they're actually watching what's coming towards them. So once you've had that acknowledgement, either by a head nod, because you're a bit closer so you can see that, or the wave of a hand again, you'll have decided at the start of the competition, had that wee briefing with your judges to say what signals you're actually going to use. As we say, try and maintain that eye contact with the judges, as we've said. If you're out in the sector again, maybe the person retrieving, if the shot's rolled a long way, they haven't seen the next person coming in because they're still walking back. You'll make sure one of the other officials, if you're spiking, that you tell the retriever that there's another implement ready to come. Also, if the retriever's brought the shot put back and then they're walking back out to the sector, they may have their back to the circle. So just make sure as the chief that they've acknowledged you as well, or the spikers brought their attention to the fact that something else is at the next implement's ready to come. Again, just like the discus, we go through and discus, hammer and javelin, we lift the cone. If you're using a cone, if you're not using a cone and it's your body, then, you know, again, in some of the smaller league matches, you might not use a cone, but certainly at bigger districts, regionals, nationals, then we do use cones, and at internationals as well, there's cones used. So we're lifting the cone, we're then indicating to the athlete that they can go into the circle. And again, at the same point, you would then give that extra check to your judges out in the sector, just to make sure they're watching and they're not watching the start of the 100 metres, which might be next to your circle. And again, as we said, photographers, the in and around, make sure they're out of the way as well. Again, sometimes your starters, depends on where your shot put is positioned, as Dean said, you may just have to make them aware. And hopefully you've had that chat beforehand, before the competition starts. You might have to hold your shot for the start of a race because the starter's on the rostrum, or the recall starters in the middle of your sector. So you obviously don't want someone throwing when you've got a recall starter standing in the middle. So just make sure everything is safe before you actually start. Okay, Mark?
Same thing goes with this video.
Let's see if it plays this time. As we said before, in an indoor competition, you have less room, so it's even more important that you get that signal back. And again, if you're the spiker or the retriever and you're out in the sector, just make sure that there is somewhere for you to go. At bigger competitions, or some competitions, they have netting around the part of the sector as well, so that can be a challenge. Just to work your way through that netting, you don't always have somewhere to go. So sometimes in indoor shot, it's easier to come forward rather than go backwards away from the shot put, because you've nowhere to go back, because there's a cage net at the back of you, or also at the side as well. So it's sometimes easier to go forward. And just remember, it's sometimes easy in the longer throws too to go into the sector rather than come out of the sector if an implement's coming towards you, especially a discus or a javelin. If the wind's caught it, it's sometimes easier to go in the way towards the sector at that 90 degrees, as we talked about earlier, rather than try and run outside the sector, whereas the javelin can be following you at times with the wind. So a few hints and tips as we go along the way. If you've got parents with you, league matches, you get a lot of parent helpers sometimes coming along, and if they want to go and watch their child run, then make sure you ask them at the start of the competition. Before the competition starts, just say, does anybody need to go away to watch an event, and you can then get someone else to cover their duty for that race. It's better that they're safe, and it's better that we get that help from volunteers, rather than not getting the help and putting them off by saying, no, you can't judge if you can't be here all day. it's good if they're a parent and they're there, they want to see their child run, but let them go and then come back, and we're more likely to keep them in the sport as well, and they'll progress through. Again, the use of electronic devices, not recommended for anybody. We ask the athletes not to bring them into the arena, but that goes for the officials too. If your phone goes off, again, try and excuse yourself. See if your event can get covered and go outside the track to take your call. Don't take a call in the middle of the sector or round the circle when you're judging. Because you can doesn't mean you should. So only go into the sector if it's absolutely necessary. Again, that's a confidence thing on where you want to be within the sector. A lot of people like to be outside to judge. There are some who prefer to be in, especially for discus. If it's travelling fast, then if you're too far out and if it lands on the left-hand side and you're on the right and you're the only spiker, that might be a challenge to find it. So again, if you have two spikers, it's always good to have one either side so you can both run in together and spot where the discus has landed. Again, if you see something that's not right, don't just carry on. Make sure you challenge it. Stop what you're doing. Get it right first. Safety always comes first. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Everything has to be safe. If it's not safe, then you don't carry on. You stop and make sure it's safe before you carry on. Accidents and near misses should be communicated to the referee or the meeting manager. UK Athletics has a forum that is filled in by the meeting manager or the referee on any incidents or accidents that happen. They go into UK Athletics. So again, if someone is badly hurt and there's a claim, then that is covered by the insurance. If it's not recorded, not reported, then these things can't happen. But also, if there's a lot of accidents and incidents happen at a certain venue, then UK will send facility staff out or facility organisers to check that venue in case there's a problem with the venue. So it could be there's an issue with that venue. So if there's lots of reports coming in from a certain venue, UK do check that out. So make sure if there is even a near miss should be reported, just so we can keep on top of these things. Validity of the javelin, again, this is a job when you're quite new to officiating. A lot of people shy away from because they find it quite a challenge. What I will say is go as far out of the sector as you can. You can't judge validity standing at the side of the sector. You need to be further away. It's like when you look up into the sky and you see an aeroplane, it's travelling very slowly across the sky. So the further you can get out of the sector, it slows that javelin down so you can see it better. It's also, get as low as you can to the grass. I don't mean put your picnic blanket out and lie down and be level with the grass, but you want to be down on your hunkers, if you like, but not on your knees. You should be able to get up and move quickly if a javelin does come towards you, if the wind catches it. So again, you want to be watching the athletes as they warm up, so that you know how far they're throwing, so you can move up and down. Don't just position yourself in one place. If you're at a league match, you may have some athletes throwing 15 metres and you'll have others throwing 40 or 50 metres. So you can't just judge for the one spot. So make sure you're moving up and down outside the sector. If you get an idea where the athletes are throwing, you'll get a better view of the landing if you do that. On circle duties around the cage, again, remember you want to be standing 2 or 3 metres back from the edge of the netting. If someone does let a hammer go or a discus, it's travelling at very high speed and the net can move up to the net's there to stop it. But if you're standing too close, then there is a chance you could be hit by that implement. So again, always keep your eye on the netting, on the hammer at all times on the athlete, but stay that 2 to 3 metres back, so that you're not going to get hit if it comes towards you. As we say again, you avoid congregating together. If you're out in the sector, you want to be standing apart so that you're you're not too close to any other fellow officials, and you can see the implements coming towards you. This reduces that ability to react. If you're standing closer, you don't know which direction to run. So make sure you're spaced out across the sector. And again, as Dean said earlier, athletes should always warm up in competition order. One, it gets them, well, it's in the rule book, but two, it gets them used to the order of throws, which then makes your event run a lot smoother and a little bit quicker. Because by the time you start, they've gotten into the habit, they know who they're after, and it's easier for calling them up. Okay.
So I will pause the presentation at the minute just for the time being, just so I can see if we've got any questions in the chat. So one question that's come in both is any top tips on judging where a discus has landed, as it will often skid a long way from where it had landed.
I guess for me is always keep your eye on it. Never, if you're spiking, then your eyes are on the discus, and as soon as it lands, you're running towards that spot. It may, there'll be others, the retrievers are watching where it skids to. You don't want to jump over it or have it hitting you, but as soon as it lands, you want to run to the spot that you saw it land. Don't hesitate, put your spike in.
That's it. You need to keep firmly focused on the back of that discus. That discus will be coming in quite quickly. You try your best to keep your focus on where that discus lands, and just focus on that point and head straight in to that point.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to my esteemed colleagues is that if it does happen. Sometimes you think the discus or the javelin or whatever is going to come at a certain angle, and then suddenly it decides to throw a kind of spanner in the works and takes a 45-degree turn. My advice would be, having been in the sector multiple times, is really to kind of move at a 90-degree angle. So moving at a right angle away from your implement. If it's coming towards you, move to the left or move to the right. The worst thing you can do is turn your back on the implement and start running, because believe me, you will not outpace that metal object flying through the sky if it's skidding off the surface. So it really is, left or right or wherever the 90-degree turn is. The key thing is that you keep that implement in your sight at all times. But it's not to degrade, the enjoyment of throws and long throws. I'm pretty sure between the three of us on this call tonight, I'm biased. I love long throws, and they are really, really enjoyable field events. It's just important that we keep each other safe at all times, both athlete as well as athletes and spectators and your fellow officials like starters. As a prime example, it's each to their own. But the main thing is we do the health and safety elements, regularly and in the same way. One question that's come in, Dean, is do you move in the same direction for left and right-handed discus throwers in terms of moving away from potentially said implement?
You basically need to adjust your position. You need to bear in mind also wind direction, because discus in particular, I've been there myself. A discus can change direction very quickly with a gust of wind. So really, it's standard whether it's right or left-handed throwers. You just need, if you're lucky enough to have people on both sides of the sector that can converge to the landing point, you can keep your eye on that. If there's one spiker, it's very difficult going from one side of the sector, whether they're right or left-handed. It's difficult going from one side of the sector to the other. So really, in both cases, it's keep a safe distance, watch the flight and judge the flight of the discus. The beauty of discus is you can almost come in as the discus is landing. You can get quite close to it, not too close. Unlike hammer, which has got a wire that's could come round and hit you and so on and so forth. So you can watch that discus in. but just be careful for um, things like the wind changes, wind directions, and them getting blown off course.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
sorry, Shona.
So, some
no,
sorry,
sorry, the
somebody
other,
made a good
sorry,
point there before. Sorry, Sean, about sector boxes.
yeah,
And it's a very, very good point because we talk about keeping your eyes fixed on the thrower and the cage if you're uh, judging on a caged event. Um, so you do get people walking backwards, and you have to be very, very careful on that. That's really you're either in the sector at that point or outside of the sector, outside of the sector boxes. We've all seen people walk backwards and fall over sector boxes and cause themselves a few injuries, shall we say. So it's very good and important points to just be aware of your positioning in regards to the to sector boxes. And also, can I just add, while we're talking about general safety on that, is watching out for potholes. We're talking about looking at implements, following the implements into the landing point. You need to make sure of what your terrain's like before the start of the competition as well. Whether it's very pitted, whether the hammer holes, for example, have not been repaired from any training sessions that are there. If you go sprinting in and turn an ankle, it's quite easy to break an ankle. So you need to be aware of your own safety in that regard as well.
I guess the other thing is the sector lines as well. If you've got curved lines across at 20, 30, 40 metres, that sometimes they blow up in the wind. And if you're walking backwards or running forwards, you could trip on those as well. Somebody else is also mentioning the sun. The sun is, yeah, a great thing. So when you're spiking, always make sure the sun's behind you so you're not looking into it. So that can determine on what side, if you're on your own spiking, what side of the sector you're on for javelin and discus. And again, for validity, make sure you're on the side with the sun behind you. Remember, it changes in the afternoon, so your position in the morning could be different for your position in the afternoon. There's another bit in the chat about who is allowed to be in the sector. So basically anyone who has done the health and safety course and who is a level 1 that has done the health and safety course. There should preferably a level 2, but a level 1 that has done the health and safety course is also allowed in the sector. I think there's another one, Mark, about
Yes.
do you want to answer that or do you want me to answer that as well?
Feel free if you wish to carry on.
Someone's asking about the long throws. So the rule for the long throws comes from the licensing, and licensing says you must have a level 2 on all long throws. There is nowhere at the moment that says there should be a level 3 there. It is always helpful to have a level 3 and higher above. So level 3s and 4s, you want all levels at your competitions. But at the moment, it's level 2. So you have to have a level 2 official in charge of a long throw.
Yeah, I can't argue with that at all. I think
Sorry, Mark. Following on from what Shona correctly says, that doesn't necessarily mean that level 2 needs to be at the gate or at the sector line for the arc for javelin. It might be safer if once they judge their team and what abilities they've got there, they could decide to be controlling that event from the sector itself. So every competition will be different as to who turns up and what levels of judges that you've got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so don't be shy if you're the chief and think you have to be at the cage. You don't have to be at the cage. If you're the most experienced and no one else is comfortable in the sector, then you'll feel free to be in the sector and, as we say, control that event from there, as Dean said.
I think Heather certainly made a very good point, and it's one that I have seen both instances in the past. It's advisable to wear appropriate footwear when you're in the sector. Wearing flip-flops or anything that's kind of open toe, um, you might not be moving as fast as you need to. So yeah, kind of wear sturdy footwear or appropriate footwear in the sector. Um, Another question that's come in, Sean and Dina, is what is your advice if an athlete applies saliva to their implement?
Who wants to go first? So that for me is a verbal warning to start with. The rule book, I can't remember the rule number, 17.5 or something it is the rule on spitting, which was brought in after COVID. So athletes should not now be spitting on implements, neither should they be rubbing it on their fingers and then rubbing it on the implement. So they quite happy for them to put water on the implement or chalk or anything. But an athlete that you see spitting on an implement, then a verbal warning initially, and for a second offence, it would be a yellow card. That was issued to an under 15 in a Scottish event last year, who continually did that. So yes, very, very, in this day and age, you can't have that
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, you'd have to get the referee to issue the yellow
The
cards.
yellow card. Yeah.
Referee would be called over, and then they would get um, that yellow card, a disciplinary yellow card.
I think, so this also happened to me last year at an NAL match. And it's not necessarily kind of what you say, it's how you say it. And said athlete decided they wanted to do the compete in the world's kind of, world spitting contest of 2024. And it was just politely explained to by myself, it's very good that you want to partake in that new sport, but not at this particular venue and preferably not at this particular event. So if you could refrain from um, doing what you've just done, I would be very gratefully appreciated because I don't want to touch your saliva, and I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want to touch mine if I did the same thing. So it's just about how you say, not necessarily what you say. Um, Another question that's come in terms of to progress to a level two, I need to be observed officiating a long throw. Do I need to lead the event or just take one of the officiating roles? Um, Shona, would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, no, for level two, you just need to take part. I mean, we would hope by level two, you're gaining a lot of experience and you're doing lots of officiating at a long throw. So you've just had that experience on officiating at a long throw. You don't have to lead it. If you're confident enough to lead it and there's someone there to shadow you and mentor you through, then that's great. But just being part of that long throw, judging a couple of different areas within the long throw, then that's all you need.
And I would
There's
say,
10 experiences, so it should cover minimum of 10 experiences to go forward for level two, and that should be covering every event within the field. So both your high jumps, long jumps, and all the throws as well.
and I would say, it's great us being part of this call tonight, and we're all field judges on this call. We all have gained experience in this in the discipline, and we all will continue to gain experience in the discipline. And if you have a less experienced colleague with you, it's a very privileged position to be able to part your knowledge and your skills to less experienced colleagues to kind of learn the ropes like you've done, and to kind of enhance their skill sets as well. So, whatever you take away from tonight, which I'm sure is a lot, then let's share that kind of knowledge and skills to colleagues that are coming through the system. Um, Even though I have been around officiating since 1865, or it certainly feels like it, I still learn, for each experience and each meeting I go to. I know Shona and Dean would echo that comment as well.
That make us
Um,
medieval.
I'm not going to go into that trap. But it's everybody, regardless of what level you're at, where you're from, whether it's Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, or the north or south, everybody operates under the same kind of umbrella as far as discipline, as far as rules, as far as procedures concerned. Um, but we're there to make sure that the athletes enjoy themselves and our fellow officials enjoy themselves, but by doing so safely. Nobody wants to see any incidents happening, and by us following the kind of process that we've kind of outlined tonight, then all the better for that. Are there any further questions? I'm conscious we're kind of coming up to the hour mark. So by all means,
I'll just come back to the CT throws, if that's okay, Mark. So
yes, you can.
we talked about it earlier. So just for CT throws, as I said, the process horns are not always used for CT throws, but again, it's about everyone staying vigilant. Again, normally there would be someone coming into the circle and presenting the implement to the athlete. That is so. It's sometimes the retriever, or it's sometimes the equipment person who depends on the level of the competition. If it's an international, there would be someone on equipment who would then walk into the circle and present the athlete with a choice of a couple of implements. The athlete then takes the implement, but the athlete's told, don't throw until you're told to, because the official then has to come out of the cage and get into their position of judging. So if you're the leader, you again would then get the acknowledgement from the officials in the sector, and then once the athlete is presented with the implement, the leader would then say to the athlete, you can throw now. And again, just another quick check of the officials out in the sector to make sure that everyone's safe before you start. Okay, so that's the protocol for the CT throws. Sorry, just came back to that one.
All right. Any other questions? Like I said, we've.
So question in the box is javelin validity for javelin landing, flag or no flag. You should only have a red flag for validity nowadays. There's no need to have a white flag. You should only be using a red. If you're using red and white and you put a white flag up on the validity, but the athlete actually steps over the line, you've then got a red flag at the other end. So you're conflicting evidence for the spectators, if you like. So you only want to ever see red flags if that's the case. So red flag for validity, and the official on the line would look across to see if you've got a red flag, and they would then also put a red flag up at the line. So just red flags for validity.
Had question that I'm going to pose to Mr. Williams. Who has priority if there's a track event and a thrower using the track to run up?
That needs to be. It depends where the track event is starting, I suppose. Whether you've got the eye line of the starter. If you're doing a javelin run up on the bend and you've got 200 meters or a 400 meters or an 800 meters about to start, if you've got enough people and you can have somebody controlling that, and we would traditionally use a yellow flag. I'm not saying that's going to happen as a league meeting, for example, but certainly, hopefully, you all aspire to going on and doing national championships and that, and we would have somebody there with a yellow flag standing at the end of the runway. Once that flag is up, then your javelin thrower has got the priority. Hopefully, the start team will have noticed that. I think you've got to judge it. If they're in the on your marks position, then I would certainly be holding your javelin thrower. If they are still milling around, adjusting their blocks, then we need to get a signal to the start team or one of the track judges, if nearer, that you've got a javelin thrower about to throw, and I think in that case the javelin thrower would take priority.
Yeah, I think if you have that conversation with your start team, I mean, your starters' assistants, if you take, for instance, say the start of 200 metres and the guys are doing practice out the blocks before their start, as they're setting, normally the starters' assistants would come round halfway round the bend. So if you just have a nod with them to say, look, I've got a javelin thrower on the runway, they can also help stop the athletes running past while that javelin thrower's on. So just keep your eyes open all the time.
Another question, Shona. Is there an established interpretation in the UK of when an athlete is deemed to have started their trial, in the case of javelin, hammer, seated throws, etc.? Is there a point where the athlete is deemed to have started their trial?
Yes, it's in the rule book.
Which
So it's
is?
on the level 2 questions. The throw starts from a stationary position. within the circle. So once the athlete is in a stationary position, that's when the throw starts. So you have to always watch your athletes. You'll get them, they'll go into the circle and they'll do all this sort of stuff. Slap their face, throw their hand in the air, and then they'll maybe swing their arms, and then they'll bend down, maybe do a couple of squats, and then they'll go into their starting position. That's when the throw starts.
That was very good acting there.
And
Thanks.
and that's why they can't walk straight into a circle and straight into their throw. They have to start from that stationary position, as Shona says.
Maybe not in the same kind of demonstration, but then certainly they're doing similar actions.
It's a good job I wasn't standing up. You would have got worse actions.
So there are a couple of minutes to go. So if MD has any additional questions, by all means, kind of use the raise hand function, pop something in the chat, or wave at me frantically or wave at us frantically. We can answer those questions. I would just say on a personal note, it's really good to see so many people on the call tonight. Not just from a numbers perspective, but all of us as officials, we enjoy the sport because we want to be part of the sport. We want to be part of the kind of the environment and help the athletes achieve the best they can. But the only kind of thing I would say, and I'm just going to share the slide for one last slide, is to say that we kind of, we start as a team of officials, and end as a team of officials every single event, every single meeting we're at. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be in Cornwall, you could be in Isle of Man, Glasgow, Cardiff, wherever. But we are there to work as a team, and if we continue to do that, then we will continue to enjoy our sport for many years to come. But the key message I would take from tonight is let us help all of our fellow officials enjoy their officiating as safely as possible, and that includes you as a individual official as well. I notice we've got a hand raised. I'll take this last question. I think we'll then kind of bring things to a close. So, Connell, you want to ask your question, sir?
Can you unmute him, Mark?
Yeah, it should.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep.
Yeah. My question before wasn't really and didn't really answer the response. I get what Sean was saying about the stationary position. In the case of a javelin, would it be perhaps when they're when they're first holding the implement and it's pointing in the direction of the infield, or would it be when they start the run up?
Well, the javelin throw, they'll come onto the runway and they've got to start from a stationary position. It's similar. They will have to start from that stationary position, and then when they start their run up, the trial has started.
So they would walk. They would pick up their implement. They would walk to wherever they're starting from.
Yeah.
And then they would get into their position on where they hold their javelin, usually above their shoulder, above their head, and then they would start the run up. And some of them will take 3 or 4 strides into their actual run up, and then it's usually 3 crossovers, isn't it? 4 strides in and 3 crossovers before they throw.
If you're linking that into the rules about when an athlete's time starts, the athlete's time will start once the athletes, once they're called up and the judges are satisfied that the athlete's clear to throw, and whether they've got their implement by then or not, their time is running.
Yeah,
but they still have to start from a stationary position on the run up.
What would be the case for a seated, say for club throw, discus, javelin?
So again, it's a similar thing. They're presented with the implement, and then they would take that implement from you. They may ask you to sit the implement on their knee because they don't have the dexterity. So again, if the implement falls, make sure you pick it up and hand it back to them, or make sure they've got a good grasp of it. But again, they would then get into their throwing position, and then they would throw. So, it's their starting position. So even for seated throwers, they would, take the implement, get themselves ready, and if it's javelin for seated, they would then take it into their arm above their head and then start their throw. If it's club, it's the same. If it's sitting on their knee, or they would, be putting it in between their fingers, depending on the way they're grasping it, and then they would go into their starting position. For some, I coached a club thrower and didn't have any grip at all, so could only lay the implement on her knee. So she would jam it into her hand. So her starting position was the implement sitting on her thighs, and then she would take her arm back and then throw sideways. So
Right.
So it's just watching the athlete and seeing what is for seated or for any disability one. It's watching the athletes warm up, see where their position is before they start.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Colonel.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
One very last question from Sarah. Any advice for athletes also competing in conflicting track events? How can we ensure they get some throws?
Well, you are allowed to change the order within the round, so you can have them throwing first in the round or last in the round, or if they're having to go away, you can have them throw in the middle of the round. So it's just about changing that order, reminding them that they should come back as quickly as possible, because if the round is finished, they can't then have that throw, but they can have their throw in the next round. So
And of course, if you've just started a round, if you can get them in earlier in that round before they actually go off to do that track event. I know this is a constant issue with leagues and things with people going off to do other events, but you just have to try and fit them in where you can. And once you've said, you won't be able to come back and have your second and third round throws in round four. You just need to make the athletes aware of that.
Yeah, I can't argue. Can't add to anything above that.
I think the only thing I would say is try to not get them to go too early.
Mm-hmm.
Especially at a league, the athletes, as soon as the announcer says, could all the 100-meter athletes go to the start, they all run. If they're on the long jump, they all disappear. And their event, they're maybe standing there for 20 minutes before they get a run. So try not to let them go too early. Just say, go find out what heat you're in and come back. So that a lot of them can go ask the starters assistant, especially if it's a league, or if they're starting with the under 11s and you've got the under 15s, they don't have to go until those races have gone. So try and keep them as long as you can and move them in the order, so the athletes are not getting flustered about panicking that they've got a race to do. Just reassure them that they won't miss the race. Go across, speak to the starter's assistant and say, look, I've got 6 long jumpers here who are also doing the 60. Can you come and get them when it's their turn? And in most cases, the starter's assistants will do that for you. As Mark says earlier, we're a team. We're not just a field team. We're a whole competitions team. We're there to help the athletes progress and to get the best they can do on that day. And so every official should be trying to do the same, no matter what discipline you're in. So you're there to help the athletes get the best performance they can.
I would say, from personal experience, having athletes going away and doing 100 or hurdles, or everybody seems to be multidisciplined nowadays. But if they're coming back from a race, and it often is I'll say little people, but kind of say athletes of a certain younger age, will often come, with, say, their spikes still on, or a discus, and panting out of breath, and it's like, take your time, take your time, put your shoes on, and we'll sort you in the end of the round. It's not necessarily kind of what you say, it's how you say it. It's not necessarily saying to the individual, right, you get your shoes changed, you're up next. It's kind of take your time, within reason, take your time, put your shoes on, can have a quick drink, and we'll get you in at the end of the round, or we'll put you in at the start of the current round, or whatever the case is. We're there to create that positive experience, and as officials, we have that hugely privileged position of being able to create that experience. Run a couple minutes over, so any last minute questions, or maybe Mr. Ritchie has bored everyone to tears on this call. But if not, just like to reiterate, thank you very much for attending this evening. We hope it's been very informative. There will be a copy of this recording that goes out to everyone on this call tonight, as well as on the home country websites in due course. But if you have any questions as a result of tonight that you kind of spring to your mind afterwards, then by all means, we'll put all of our contact details at the end of this session and in an email. And by all means, please just don't hesitate to contact us if need be. But I will stop the recording and